Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be continuing our Space Marines chapters videos with one of my favourites, the Blood Angels. Now they are a very popular chapter at the moment, and so we thought we'd go into a little bit of their background and history before taking you into a little bit more of the detail surrounding this favourite chapter. As I mentioned, their name is the Blood Angels and they are the 9th Space Marine Legion that was formed during the Great Crusade. Their Primarch was a great leader known as Sanguinius, and I'll go into a lot of detail surrounding him in this video. Their current chapter master is a very old Space Marine named Dante, who I mentioned in our last video, and I will mention in more detail in his own video. And their homeworld is Baal, where their fortress monastery is located and where many of their recruits are taken. Now, the armour of the Blood Angels is a red colour, also known as blood red, and they also have a black Aquila on their chest plate, which is the Imperial symbol, and sometimes they also have a winged blood drop, which is their chapter symbol. Their helmet colour can also change depending on the squad they're in, and the squad's function, although I will go into that in their chapter organisation video. And now the chapter speciality, as many may know, is both assault and deep striking, being one of the most close combat heavy armies in the Imperium. Now they are a first founding Space Marine chapter, which means their chapter actually traces its lineage right back to the Blood Angels Legion, which was, as I mentioned, formed during the Great Crusade. They are also known, as well as being very ferocious in battle, for being an incredibly long-lived type of Space Marine, many reaching the age of 500 and over, with some reaching the venerable ages of 1,000, although one has only ever been known to do that. And they also have a very refined sense of aesthetics, which is quite rare among a brotherhood of what are essentially living weapons, and they are known for having very highly decorated and embossed armour, showing their dedication to the more refined arts of humanity. Now, as I mentioned, the homeworld of the Blood Angels is Baal, and they also occupy its two moons, known as Baal Primus and Baal Secundus, from which many of the Blood Angels' new recruits are chosen. Now, the Blood Angels' Primarch, Sanguinius, fell upon Baal Secundus after he and his brother Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy in the days before the Great Crusade. In the ancient days, Baal and its moons had very Earth-like atmospheres. Baal itself has always been a very red rust desert world, which is very similar to Mars in its appearance. However, the moons were at one time very close to a paradise. Now, they are a blasted and radioactive wasteland after what was assumed to be a civil war between the two moons. This forced the world's human tribes to live most of their short lives in radiation suits in order to survive the harsh environments that now prevail upon the moons. Mutants were once rife upon the worlds, frequently at war with the remaining humans for dominance until the coming of Sanguinius. Going into a little bit of the history of the chapter, it mainly surrounds Sanguinius himself because he is such a pivotal figure in Imperial history that it is almost impossible to talk about the Blood Angels without mentioning him first. Now, they were created from his genetic material, and as with all Primarchs, Sanguinius was genetically engineered with the sciences of the Emperor, but was cast into the warp during his infancy along with his brother Primarchs. And he eventually ended up on Baal Secundus, as I mentioned before. Sanguinius was affected by the warp, and when he was found, he had a small pair of angelic wings growing from his back that grew into mighty pinions, capable of carrying the superhuman aloft. It's also whispered that Sanguinius was at least partially psychic, as he had the power of precognizance, which also means that he could tell the future. Now, when the Emperor found Baal in his search for the 20 Primarchs, Sanguinius immediately recognised him for who he was and pledged to the Emperor's service, becoming one of the most beloved and trusted commanders in the Imperium next to Horus Lubrical and the Emperor himself. Now, during the Great Crusade, the Blood Angels became known as being excellent shock assault troops, and formed a rivalry with the similarly assault-orientated World Eaters Legion, meaning that they were always in the forefront of battle, and were known for using both chain sword and chain axe to bring the will of the Emperor to the unenlightened worlds. However, this all changed at the start of the Horus heresy. Now, Horus, in an attempt to divide the loyalist chapters, dispatched many of them far away from Holy Terra and the defences of the Imperium. The Blood Angels were sent to the Cygnus cluster near the galactic core in the Ultima Segmentum, and it was one such venture where 7 planets and 15 moons had been taken over in a bloody slaughter by the demonic hordes of the greater demon of Slaanesh, Cheirissus the Perverse. Sanguinius had no reason to suspect his best friend, who was the War Master at the time, would eventually betray him to the powers of chaos, and so went willingly into the jaws of this trap. When the Blood Angels first arrived in the system, they were assaulted by chaos energies, ravaging their human crew. Most Space Marines were immune to its effects, leaving those few not driven mad to restrain the crazed crew members. However, they still continued with their mission, and with Cygnus Prime in the grip of a demonic invasion, the world in ruin, the Blood Angels Legion struck a furious attack, dropping in to engage the cultists and demons upon what would become known as the Plains of the Damned. Sanguinius swore to personally cast Chrysis down and vanquish him, and so hence made for the Cathedral of the Mark, the demon's lair. However, outside its entrance, Sanguinius was faced by his greatest single foe, Kabanda, the greater demon and bloodthirster of Khorne. Confronting the angel, the bloodthirster spoke, attempting to sway him to chaos. Kabanda attempted to tempt Sanguinius to join the forces of Khorne and destroy Chrysis and rule the Cygnus cluster, whilst revealing at that time the corruption of Horus and his plans to assault Terra. Sanguinius rejected the news of Horus's betrayal, claiming it was lies and nothing could entice him to reject his oaths of loyalty to the Emperor, and launched an attack alongside 10 of his greatest companies. The demon was powerful enough to match the Primarch, but the grace of the angelic Sanguinius allowed him to cause a mighty chest wound to the greater demon. In reply, the bloodthirster caught and trapped the angel's legs, crushing them and leaving Sanguinius temporarily crippled. With Sanguinius cast down, the demon taunted him, saying, "I let you live this time, manling. Your legs will heal, but this wound will always fester." Rather than killing the Primarch, the bloodthirster instead turned and destroyed 500 of Sanguinius' sons. The psychic backlash caused by this loss cast Sanguinius into unconsciousness. With their progenitor cast down, the Blood Angels redoubled their efforts, becoming filled with a dark berserk fury, which drove them to destroy the demon horde and cleanse all of Cygnus Prime. Those demons who did not fall by their blades fled back into the Immaterium, or the Warp, alongside their overlord Chrysis. This was the Black Rage, the gene curse of the Blood Angels made manifest, and as they awoke from this berserker fury, the devastation of what they had wrought and the thousands of dead hammered home that a curse now lay upon the souls of the Blood Angels. When their Primarch awoke, his legs were already beginning to heal. However, nothing could be done for the anguish he felt for the loss of his sons at the hands of the Bloodthirster. He vowed that whatever the future, whatever the cost, he would rain vengeance down upon the demon Kabanda. It was then that Blood Angels received a message from Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists and brother of Sanguinius. He called them back to Terra, saying that the War Master had launched his assault and was approaching with a great fleet to destroy the defences and take the mighty Imperial world for himself. The Blood Angels left Cygnus, taking the corpses of their fallen to be buried on the slopes of Mount Seraph on Baal, as opposed to leaving them to rot on a dead planet. Cygnus was evacuated, and no trace that the Legion was there has ever been left behind. Now comes the story of the Siege of Terra, and I'm not actually going to go through this in too much detail, because in all honesty it's a very large event, and although Sanguinius plays a very large part in it, it's not something that I want to reveal at this moment, or rather I would wait for the Horus Heresy videos. So I'm going to just trace out what happened, but I'm going to leave out a lot of details, so please don't leave angry comments below, I'll deal with it later. So during the siege, the Blood Angels were one of the 3 legions that fought beside the Emperor against the traitors. Now, when Horus lowered the shields of his battle barge, and the Emperor teleported aboard the ship, Sanguinius went with him as one of his warriors. Now, the noble Primarch became separated from the Emperor during the teleportation, and came across Horus alone. The War Master then tried to sway Sanguinius and turn him to chaos, but the angelic Primarch refused, and attacked Horus immediately. Now, the demonically strengthened Horus was at the height of his power at this stage, and slew Sanguinius, as the Primarch knew he would. He had foreseen his death, and yet still engaged his traitor brother, knowing he would die. Now, Sanguinius' final death left a strong psychic imprint on his legion, and all the Blood Angels contain with him the memories of their father's violent demise. However, Sanguinius went willingly to his death, knowing his sacrifice would buy the Emperor time to arrive, and that only he could create the physical dent in Horus's armour that would eventually allow the Emperor to defeat him. Now, the aftermath of Sanguinius' death is known to many. His legion on Terra felt their father's violent death, and it drove them into the Black Rage. Their rage was so strong that it drove all the traitors off Terra, along with help from the other Imperial forces, and although it was a great victory, the loss they felt and the presence of the Black Rage tars their memory for all time. And now a lot has happened since then, and the Blood Angels have proven that they are one of the staunchest and most loyal legions in the entire Imperium, although there has been times where the Black Rage has caused many to question their purity and their sincerity towards the Emperor. Their recent history, of course, is filled with many glorious battles. Now, in Millennium 38, they fought the Siege of Bale Alpha, where the Blood Angels arrived in time to save the beleaguered world from an Orc war. Now, in the current Millennium 41, in the year 742, they took part in the First Tyrannic War, where they sent 3 companies of Blood Angels to aid the Ultramarines against High Fleet Behemoth. Later in that millennium, in year 798, there was an assault on Baal, where they came under attack from an Orc War under war boss Big Scorcher. Although 2 of the 3 invading Orc space hulks were destroyed in orbit by the Blood Angels, a third would land on the surface and disgorge thousands of Orcs. The defences of the Blood Angels Fortress Monastery, which admittedly are not as strong as many others, would have fallen if not for the 41 dreadnoughts, led by the Furioso himself, who managed to hold off the Orcs long enough for the reinforcements to arrive from orbit and remove this taint from their world. Now, in Millennium 41, many of you will know about the Second War of Armageddon, and now it was part of an Orc War called War Ghazghkull, which ravaged the Hive world and strained its defences. The Blood Angels, as well as their brothers from the Ultramarines and the Salamanders, arrived to lend aid. Such was Commander Dante's reputation, being one of the oldest and most experienced commanders in the entire Imperium. Both Tushan and Calgar ceded the overall command of the Space Marine Strike Force to him. Now, the Blood Angels bore the brunt of the close-quarter fighting and eventually culminated in a mass drop pod assault into the heart of Ghazghkull's forces, which finally broke the back of the Orc army and allowed the Imperials to triumph over the Orcs on Armageddon. Now, in the year 999 of Millennium 41, the Third War of Armageddon was fought. Now, despite the bulk of the chapter being deployed against the threat of High Fleet Leviathan, Commander Dante still deployed the 3rd Company, led by Captain Tycho, to Armageddon, where the Hive world was falling under another war created by war boss Ghazghkull. During the conflict, Captain Tycho actually succumbed to the Black Rage, finally meeting a valiant end as part of the Death Company upon the walls of High Fleet Tempestora. Brother Captain Maccabee succeeded him in command of the company and eventually helped to lead the defenders to victory against this great horde. Now, again in this year, the 13th Black Crusade occurred. Now, the Blood Angels contributed 4 companies to this battle against Abaddon the Despoiler, and were deployed to push back the Chaos Forces advancing on Agrippina, and seek out the leader of the Crusade. Although I'm not going to go into too much information surrounding that battle, as there will be a video on the 13th Black Crusade later on in our video order. Finally, relating to the history of the Blood Angels, we need to talk about the current state of affairs. Now, at this moment, a tendril of the High Fleet Leviathan is actually on a direct course for Baal. Now, on top of this threat is also a massive demon army, led by the bloodthirster Kabanda again, which had already struck at Ammonite, the outermost planet of the Baal system. Facing a possible war on 2 fronts, Commander Dante has sent out a call for all chapters descended from the Blood Angels to send forces to aid their ancestor legion. The Flesh Tearers are actually the first to have done so, deploying their entire chapter for war. Ultimately, all but the Lamenters do so, and even the renegade Knights of Blood have come to aid their forefathers despite being reviled within the Imperium. Now, that is everything I wanted to talk about in relation to the history of the Blood Angels this week. So what's going to happen is we're going to go into a little bit more about the biology of the Blood Angels next week, and then move on to a little bit of their organisation, structure, and some of the special stuff that happens within the Blood Angels. So if you have any comments or suggestions as to what you want to come next as surrounding the Blood Angels, or if there's anything specific you want me to discuss, do let me know. And the voting is now open again for the next chapter video you want to see, so if you didn't get through this time, don't hesitate to vote again, and we'll see what we can do for our next set of chapter videos. All that is left for me to say is thank you for watching, and to see you next time on the Vaults of Terra.